Hello everyone, my name is Buck and welcome to a video series I am calling the SNES in chronological order, where I play through every Super Nintendo game in chronological order. This is technically going to be a kind of challenge, not really skill-based, but I have some rules for what I'm doing when I'm going through and making these videos, so I figured I would explain it at the beginning of this video here. First rule is I have to play the game for an hour, no exceptions. Second rule is if I have to look something up, that counts as played time. There's some esoteric things on the Super Nintendo that would typically be fixed by reading a manual, and since I'm not going to have access to every game manual and have to look things up, part of the time I'm playing, if it has to be spent looking something up, is going to count towards me playing that game, because it effectively is. I don't know, if you disagree with me, be mad at me in the comments. The third rule is no save states. I'm going to be playing these games as developer intended as I can, and these games weren't designed with save states in mind. I want to actually experience what playing these games would have been like on real hardware as much as possible, and save states would simply not be that. I also just don't like playing games with save states. I like to play a game, and if I literally can't play the game, like I'm not actually good enough, it's whatever. I'll write about what I see. The release order that I'm going to be using for this series is the release order for games on Wikipedia, on the list of Super Nintendo games. So if anything ends up being not accurate, because of the Wikipedia article, but I can't find a more reliable source than the Wikipedia article for every Super Nintendo game with its release date. So this is what we're working. I hope you will join me on this journey. I think it's really interesting to look at a system in the order that it comes out, so that you can see the progression of the system. By the time I was really cognizant of video games and time progression, the Super Nintendo library was effectively done. I was playing Super Nintendo JRPGs on my PlayStation as opposed to ever having played them on the Super Nintendo. So seeing them this way might give me a little bit of a different perspective than I had playing the games growing up. That's kind of what I hope to accomplish with this project, is see if I was growing up with a Super Nintendo instead of a PlayStation and then an Xbox, what would I have experienced? I definitely wouldn't have owned every video game for the system, but that's neither here nor there. Today we are going to be looking at F-Zero, Gradius III, SimCity, Pilotwings, and Super Mario World, which, as far as Wikipedia is concerned, were the launch titles for the Super Nintendo in the US. Oh wait, I didn't mention that we're focusing on US games in the series. This is going to be US releases. We won't be looking at any Super Famicom games or only European releases in this particular series. So, join me as we start by looking at F-Zero. I never got to play F-Zero as a kid, and I never had any friends who even mentioned the game, if I'm being honest. Which is a little surprising to me with how positively this game is looked back on nowadays. I'm a bit of a racing game aficionado, up to and including spending hundreds of hours and dollars on initial D arcade machines in my time, and it has always struck me as odd that no one I've ever talked racing game shot with has brought up this game. You know, come to think of it, it's not very often that many people bring up Super Nintendo or 16-bit racing games in general, but after playing F-Zero, I think I know why. But I'll get to that later. Gonna be honest, I don't love the title screen theme, but the graphics are quite impressive to me for a launch game. Jumping into the game is quick, and the controls are definitely intuitive, including using the shoulder buttons in a way that I believe helps you turn easier. I'm not sure. I could probably find out if I read the manual, but that isn't part of this project, so the best you'll get is my context-based conjecture. When you start the game, you're presented with 4 ships to choose from, 3 race series with 3 difficulties for those race series. I'm under the impression that each series has 5 races, but I can't be exactly sure as I was able to successfully complete the first race series in the time that I played the game. Coming back, recording this VO, there are 5 races per each series, from what I can tell in the interface. And so that means you have around 15 tracks to race on, which is, with my limited understanding of the breadth of Super Nintendo racing games, quite a bit of content. I will say I generally enjoyed my time with this game, but I have several gripes with it that ultimately led me not really wanting to come back to the game after my hour-long play session. Controlling the Blue Falcon feels pretty good to me, and they probably intended it as the default ship for the game. I had quite a lot of fun racing with it when I was literally by myself, but being around other racers in the game is where the fun for me falls off, and by design you're going to be around other ships on the track a lot. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but the collision physics, to put it generously, are completely busted in this game. To the point that by the end of my PlayStation, I began to dread seeing any other ship on the course. If you inadvertently get too close to an opponent, you effectively completely lose control of your car. And I honestly have no idea how I'm supposed to predict what will happen during or after a collision. You really don't have that many real opponents in a race to worry about, at least on the easy difficulty, but that flips on its head after the first lap of any race, where the game decides to add traffic for some ungodly reason. As a rule, I don't like traffic in racing games, but it's especially egregious in F-Zero, as the traffic literally affects you differently than it affects your opponents, with the most glaring example of this being the exploding traffic does not explode when your opponents run into them, but they will always explode if you hit them. When I saw this, it infuriated me, because I don't really like when a game just decides to make something much more difficult for you than the AI for no other reason than they want to make something more difficult for you than the AI, which, when your opponent is the AI, just feels cheap. While the experience with the traffic was jarring enough, there are actually a couple other things that kind of turned me off from wanting to come back from F-Zero. The first thing I'll mention is this clip with no context. I actually like the health and life system that the game uses. It forces you to want to make sure you minimize your mistakes, and not dying is actually a good smaller goal to work towards than winning a race. It gives you multiple indicators of your performance and sets F-Zero apart from most other racing games. However, crashing, meaning you have to completely restart a race, is especially brutal if you crash towards the end of a race. And in the later tracks, there are often places where making one small mistake can decimate your health bar. However, the whole land in the wrong place and you die thing is definitely not enjoyable, especially for a course like Whiteland 2, which is the final track of the Queen series, where in the attempts that I got at it, I couldn't even figure out how to do the jump before I ran out of lives, and I just went to try something else. I went and tried the King series. The other large gripe I have with the game is that when I finish the most beginner series, which is the Night series on beginner, I actually was a bit confused about what the game showed me, and had no idea if I won the series or not. The game showed me the results from all 5 races, but it doesn't seem like the game tracked any position points, and having played Super Mario Kart, where each series ends with a reward ceremony, this definitely felt a bit lackluster. I actually went back after my session while writing the script and beat every race in first place in the Night Cup on beginner, and literally nothing different happened. besides my best times being updated, which I don't know. I'm not expecting something huge, but something would be better than literally just a spreadsheet-style results screen. Ultimately, I enjoyed most of my time playing F-Zero, but it's a game that definitely suffers from its age and technological limitations, with weird physics and limited features. And I'm not sure why someone would feel compelled to come back to this when games like the Wipeout series or F-Zero GX for the GameCube exist. Although I will say, can you imagine a Forza Horizon-style game with the F-Zero ships, like just in like an F-Zero world? Doing Forza Horizon-style stunts or events, the showcases. I think that would be amazing. But I assume with the technical limitations, frame rates, and graphics as they are, we'll probably never get something like that. But if we did, I would love it. I have a complicated relationship with space shooters, in that I literally never played any as a kid. I didn't have any, none of my friends had any, and I never rented any. Just a side note as I'm recording this, I just realized I said I never rented any. And I wonder how many people are going to watch this video who won't remember or know that one, video stores, like video rental stores existed, and in those video rental stores you could just rent console video games. There was a large section. You could just pick them up, look at them, read the manuals. I'm an old man. Anyway, I spent a lot of time in the arcade, but in the arcade I was much more concerned with Dance Dance Revolution, Soul Calibur 2, and Initial D than I was with some random quarter-eating shoot-'em-up game. In college, though, I had a few serious months where I got into the mainline Touhou games. If you're not aware of what Touhou is a bullet hell series that's gotten way more popular for its weird fan-made games than its bullet hell games, from what I can tell on Steam lately. And a game on the PS3 called the Gundamonium Collection, which was a set of 3 other bullet hell games. And I played those games for a long time in college. So I'm not inexperienced with games like Gradius III, but Gradius III isn't a bullet hell game, and from my experience, you have to play bullet hell games and more traditional space shooters like Gradius III fairly differently. Anyway, that was a really long-winded way for me to say that I suck at space shooters, so my evaluation of this game may be a little bit lacking, as I didn't get much further in my last attempt in my hour-long session as I did my first attempt. Upon boot up, I was again impressed by the graphics of the intro. I guess I'm so used to playing NES games lately, or Super Nintendo games like Final Fantasy IV, that I'm not accustomed to the fidelity that the Super Nintendo can actually put out. The game has a simple options menu with some difficulty selection and some quality of life stuff, and when you start the game, you're given a smorgasbord of upgrade options for your ship that you can use to play the game. I think it's pretty cool, to be honest, if not incredibly overwhelming for someone who has never played the game before. You're even able to create your own upgrade layouts, which I think is incredibly interesting for a game like this. You pick your options, and this game is like a bunch of other Konami space shooters I've played. For example, Life Force on the NES, I'm pretty sure uses a very similar upgrade system, where you pick up upgrades that progress across the options at the bottom, and you can press the A button to activate the upgrade. Or you can set an option to have the game upgrade things automatically for you, which I ended up doing later in my play session, as I felt like I was making the worst decision every time when what upgrade I got was up to me. Even the very beginning of this game was brutally difficult for me, as you are probably seeing right now. But I eventually got over my frustration of constant one-shot deaths because I remembered something about these types of games while I was playing it. And that was, this game is literally meant to be beaten in one sitting. I'm not saying a new player will sit down and beat it. I'm saying that to beat the game, you have to sit down and beat every boss without running out of continues. There's no saving, there's no password system. I just did a little bit of my own research that people love to tell me to do, and it seems like Super Nintendo games were at least $50 back in the day. And I can't imagine just dropping $50 on a game and finishing it in a day. You know, with the way games are made nowadays, people expecting so much entertainment time for their money. And, you know, I'm not going to make a value judgment on that right now. That is a whole different topic that I would really need to gather my thoughts on. I do think that is something to keep in mind when you look at the difficulty of games like this and what the game is expecting you to do. Because if you were gonna go and spend $50 on this game in the fall, like the winter of 1991, that's a large commitment. So, you know, this is a game that kind of suffers from the artifact difficulty that a lot of NES games have, where you have to beat it in one sitting, so if it's not brutally difficult from the get-go, it almost doesn't feel worth your time. I'll also say, doing well in this game is fun. It's annoying to die constantly, but in the few instances of my play session where I actually did well and ended up somewhat powerful, it felt really great to get back at the random enemies that wrecked me constantly. As you've probably already seen, this game suffers from some really bad slowdown at certain places, but I never felt like I died because of the slowdown or the resultant speed up once the slowdown ended. The thing I liked most about my time with this game was the first two bosses, which were the only bosses that I saw, but anyway. I thought both designs were really weird and cool, and the boss fights themselves were my favorite part of playing the game. I definitely see where bullet hell games got their inspiration from, as I find learning the boss patterns and figuring out how to beat them a lot more fun than just fighting the random waves of enemies in between the levels of the game. I enjoyed my time with Gradius III. I like the graphics, I like the music, but the game is definitely pretty difficult, and in 2022 it's a little frustrating to feel like you've made zero progress after a bad run, compared to more modern genres like Souls-likes and roguelites, where small amounts of progression make the taste of defeat a little less bitter. We'll definitely keep playing Gradius 3, at least for a while, and if what you've seen is appealing to you, I think you should try it as well. At least for a few sets of continues. It's pretty fun, and only a minor time investment if you're as bad at space shooters as I am. Pilotwings is an incredibly unique game. I believe the premise is that you're in training for an air stunt school or something like that, and the game demands that you get as close to perfection as possible to progress. You hop in, you're presented with two challenges: landing a plane, and flying through some rings and landing from a skydiving jump. Fortunately, the game always gives you access to the controls for whatever you're doing, and controlling each craft I ended up controlling was relatively intuitive. You know, I would complain about some of the idiosyncrasies with the controls, but I honestly think they did the best they could with what they had. In addition to each of the controls being listed before every challenge, there is also a breakdown of how you're going to be scored for each challenge, and that's pretty useful for trying to understand what you need to focus on when you're completing the challenges. Or, you know, figuring out why your score is so bad after you finish a mission. I didn't actually make a lot of progress in this game, only getting to about the third level after playing for definitely more than an hour, because I forgot to record my first attempts at the first level of the game. The first level I found relatively easy to do, but I'm pretty sure I had to restart it at least once. I did fail the second level the first time I tried it, but I barely even remember that as I'm writing the script, so I'm going to focus on my struggles with the third level here, and it'll kind of give you an idea of what playing the game is like, if it actually interests you. So the first major struggle I had with this level was figuring out how to actually get the biplane into the air. Amusingly enough, I managed to do this on literally my first try and ended up really struggling with it for several subsequent attempts. Ultimately, I figured out the most consistent way to get the plane in the air was going max throttle and holding the down button for dear life, hoping the plane takes off. After the plane gets in the air, you have to deal with flying through some rings that involve some fairly nimble maneuvering that I'm not really sure how to do even as of writing. And I constantly got horrible points for the landing and was never really sure why. I probably missed something in the scoring that described it. The second brutal challenge in the third level of this game is piloting a jetpack, hitting some vertical beams, and landing. This is actually the easiest challenge in the third stage in my opinion, but the first time I did this, I had no idea where I was supposed to land, and flailed around like an idiot trying to figure it out. I will say the beam collision is a little questionable for my tastes, but I ultimately got over this challenge being difficult after I figured out I need to actually look at the map to figure out where things are at the start of the level. Speaking of the map, oh boy, this hang glider thing is annoying. The first time I tried, no idea where to land, crashed. Second time I tried, looked at the map, knew roughly where to land, but the hang glider is definitely the least intuitive flying implement the game has given you up to this point. I understand the hang glider has no propulsion system, so it isn't easy to go up with, but it really... how do I say this? It seems to increase and decrease its elevation for no particular reason, and I don't just mean accidentally hitting the air current a second time. There is actually an air current right next to where you're supposed to land the hang glider, and I definitely hit that once. But that's not what was happening when what I'm talking about was happening. You're probably seeing in the gameplay footage now, the hang glider will just randomly go up for no perceivable reason, and then go back down quickly for no perceivable reason. It also took me a while to figure out that you need to hold the flare button to land, or you absolutely wreck yourself. Because apparently your in-game character has no real drive for survival, as you may have seen from some crashing in the gameplay footage. But yeah, that's about 45 minutes of the hour I spent playing Pilotwings, was doing those 3 challenges repeatedly. If I were to actually go through my best runs and add them together, that would be enough for me to have gotten past the 3rd level, but you can't do that. You have to do all 3 of those things well enough to pass in one run. I really enjoyed playing Pilotwings. I actually played it as a kid, but I'm pretty sure as a kid I had no idea what I was doing. It was just flailing around and would just fail each of the challenges and then turn it off. When I was playing games as a kid, I really had no idea what I was doing when we had a Super Nintendo. If you've never played Pilotwings and you appreciate unique experiences as much as I do, I'm gonna highly recommend that you check it out, as I'm not really sure how many other places you can get an experience like Pilotwings. It's like a cool early flight simulator, and I do think it's worth going back to if you've never done it, because it's just fun. I was worried I wouldn't really know what to say about my time playing SimCity before I started working on this project. And I was correct to be worried. But I'll try my best. I've never been much of a sim game guy. I liked messing around in Roller Coaster Tycoon and Zoo Tycoon as a kid. Like in the little game demos that you could get that let you play the game very limited. But that's the extent of my experience with these kinds of games. I can't say I don't see the appeal either, especially in 2022. Just taking the time to build some kind of utopian society while the world constantly crumbles around us definitely could be a relaxing and enjoyable experience. However, I'm not sure it's worth doing with a Super Nintendo version of SimCity. I will say the controls, again, as is kind of the pattern with these launch games, are nice. And the basics of the game seem relatively simple until you realize that you've literally made multiple mistakes in your city planning immediately. Like I did. And I just kept going to watch the train crash slowly happen. I played my hour of the game in the practice mode, where I assume you're given a basic starting point, and you just play the game in what I assume is an easier mode, trying to get a population of 30,000 people. In my hour, I did not achieve this goal. The game has a graph in the upper right-hand corner that roughly tells you what your city needs, split into industrial, commercial, and residential zones. There's also about 1,000 things that the game doesn't tell you about, and since the game didn't tell me about it, I'm not going to tell you about them either. I am a little confused about how the aforementioned zones are built. I understand they need power, but I don't know if my power plant has a limit to how many zones it can power. I understand I need to build zones, but sometimes I place them and then they don't actually get built, even if they have power. I now understand that I built my city very poorly, and learning from that mistake is cool, and I wouldn't mind trying this game again. But boy, I'm not sure why I would choose this SNES simulation game when I could play any PC version of this game. As of writing, I don't really remember this game's music, which means it probably wasn't bad, but didn't really stand out either. Probably appropriate for music for a chill-out sim game like this. I gradually expanded my city as I was playing, trying to keep up with the graph, trying to figure out how to deal with the fact I didn't actually make space for roads, trying to figure out how the power lines actually worked, so on and so forth. And I feel like I was able to make decent progress for my first time playing the game, but one thing ended up happening that really made me not want to come back. Towards the end of the session, I realized I should probably have a police department because I was getting notifications of crime and a fire department. So I got them, but those resources really drain your money in a low population city with a low tax rate. After starting to lose my money from building a police department and a fire department, and my population tanking in the last year of my play, it was really frustrating because the advice guy that you may have seen from the game footage that I'm showing told me that my city was fine. So my population was crashing, but I had no idea why, and the game wasn't telling me why with the tools that are supposed to be there that are supposed to tell you whether your city is actually doing well or not. I feel like if you like sim games, more recent games are probably more enjoyable. And if you don't like sim games, you probably aren't going to be convinced by this one. It is a really cool piece of old technology, especially since I think they pulled off using mouse-style controls on a Super Nintendo pretty well. But probably not worth your time nowadays unless you're looking for a very specific experience of an old PC game not on a PC. I'm honestly not sure what I can say of value in regards to Super Mario World. That is, assuming anything I have to say about any of these games has any value, but hey, at least I'm having fun. I like to think I'm pretty good at figuring out what I like about games and what I enjoy. I like having different experiences and analyzing those experiences, if the idea behind this series didn't make that obvious. In my first draft of this section, I said that I found this session of Super Mario World boring, and I think I found it boring because, one, I was rushing through the levels, skipping most of the secret exits, because I thought rushing through the levels and seeing where I could get in an hour would be fun, and two, I've beaten Super Mario World like 6 times. I played the first few worlds dozens of times as a kid. To make something very clear, if you've never played Super Mario World and like 2D platformers, you absolutely should play Super Mario World. Also, please comment on this video if you've never played Super Mario World, because I would love to know why you are watching this video if you have never played Super Mario World. But to get back to what I was saying, I think Super Mario World is a lot more enjoyable if you're playing the game without an exact goal in mind. Unless you're a speedrunner, I guess. I didn't find going through the levels quickly, just to get through them quickly, very fun. I think because I wasn't really interacting with many of the more fun puzzles or secrets inside the levels, and I was putting some amount of pressure on myself to achieve something as opposed to just chilling out and doing whatever I wanted in the game for an hour. I think when you play Super Mario World, you should be chilling. I like finding every secret exit as soon as I get access to them. I like going back to old levels and grabbing power-ups. I like playing Super Mario World ROM hacks as well, and I wonder if that also led me to not enjoying the vanilla levels as much, since I'm so used to ROM hack style levels. Not the Kaizo ones, though, that's torture. Anyways, I don't know what I can say about Super Mario World that hasn't been said a million times. It's one of the best Super Nintendo games I've ever played, and it was a launch title, which honestly kind of depresses me considering I'll be playing some much worse games as this series goes on. Hello everyone, it's Buck again. Thanks for sticking to the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, want to see more of the series, please like the video, subscribe to my channel. I'm pretty excited about going on this particular journey, and I hope at least some people will want to come with me on it. This is my first time doing a project like this. I've done YouTube before, Let's Plays specifically, and I've done some streaming. But this is the first time I've made I'm gonna say higher effort video content. You may or may not agree with me, but I'm gonna say it's higher level effort video content. I thought the launch games were pretty good. I did want to address a couple things that I said in the video now that I've finished recording it. The first thing I'm going to mention is I don't love my F-Zero script anymore after doing all the work to make it. I feel like I was pretty hard on that game. I really had fun playing it, but it has limited features as part of it being a launch title. And I think that since it has so many limited features and the way you interact with the traffic, it just isn't something I want to spend more time coming back to. But I had a lot of fun while I was doing it, ignoring the whole almost unacceptable collision physics thing. The other thing I wanted to address is Super Mario World. I didn't say a lot about it because I didn't feel like I needed to. I didn't want to waste anyone's time. I really like Super Mario World, but I'm not a professional content maker, and I couldn't really find an interesting spin from my hour of play because, as I said, I was kind of bored. I just wasn't in the mood for Super Mario World, I guess. Or, the way I was playing it was not the way I actually enjoyed playing the game. Anyways, in the next episode of the series, we're going to be looking at some more interesting games. And by interesting, I mean not as good. But you'll see that in the next video. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. Have a good day. Bye-bye.